the right side, to the 10, to the 5, touchdown! 6, going to the hoop, puts it up, puts it in! A fantastic play.
Welcome in to Magnolia Fields. Frank, Dodds, Brad, Logan with you for the first time ever. Episode 1. We are inside the Richard Schwartz and Associates studios, and they have got this place looking great. And I'm looking forward to this episode 1. Already, all week long, I've just been giddy about getting here and getting to start to talk about Ole Miss sports, the hotty-toddy edition of Magnolia Fields. Brad?
There's no doubt. And in Frank, you and I have worked together on a ton of games, and we talked off air about Ole Miss a whole lot. So it's really cool to come together and talk on air about Ole Miss and Ole Miss football. We'll hear from Athletic Director Keith Carter in just a moment, and I'm really excited to hear about his thoughts on this exciting 24 season.
Yeah, no doubt. He'll give us some insight, and that's one of our things we promise here on Magnolia Fields. From Oxford to Tupelo, Corinth to Philadelphia, Starkville to Kosciuszko, and everywhere in between, we're here to bring the excitement. And I don't know about expert analysis, but we'll have some analysis and have some opinions.
We'll do the best we can.
Some player spotlights, but yeah, what a big get for us to have the athletic director, Keith Carter. He's done a fantastic job. You know what? I'm glad he's young because he's got a lot of things to figure out about revenue share and NIL and big crowds this year. It should be an exciting fall.
It's big shoes to fill, and he walked into a situation that was not ideal with football. It ended up not being ideal with basketball, but he's made 2 terrific hires in Lane Kiffin and Chris Beard. We've seen what Coach Joe has done on the women's basketball program. We got a brand new facility for softball. A lot of positive things happening in Oxford for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. And we appreciate the Max South Sports Network for having us in here and setting up this opportunity for us all to get together and talk about one of our favorite topics that we never stop talking about. And Magnolia Fields, we're going to cover it all season long. So we hope you enjoy this episode 1. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, hopefully Keith Carter will be with us, the athletic director from Ole Miss.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, you know who to call. Call me. Remember, one call, that's all.
Welcome back into Magnolia Fields, episode 1, inside the Richard Schwartz and Associates studio. We promised you would hear insider stories that you won't hear anywhere else here on Magnolia Fields. And as you can see on the screen, there's the man himself, Keith Carter. Brad, why don't you introduce our guest?
Yeah, we want to thank Keith for coming on. Keith, Ole Miss fans know a terrific basketball player, 4-year starter for Ole Miss from 95 to 99, and, of course, has been the athletic director at Ole Miss since 2019. And, Keith, we're excited for you to join us here today, and we're really excited about talking about the season, one in which almost all the games are sold out, specifically in the Southeastern Conference. Only a couple of hundred tickets remain for Kentucky and Mississippi State. Oklahoma and Georgia is sold out. Keith, thanks for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about the current ticket situation in Oxford.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Brad. Appreciate you having me on the show. It's exciting. This is kind of what we've been working toward over the past few years, and close to a sellout last year. This year, sold out in the summer, a few months before the season, as you mentioned, just a few, 100 tickets left for a couple of games, but exactly what you want. You want the buzz, you want the hype around a season like this. Our fans have bought in and they're super excited, and everywhere I go, people can't wait to that first game. So, student tickets have sold like crazy. I think we're almost up to 13,000, which will be the most we've ever sold for students as well. As we know, our student population continues to grow, but Ole Miss and Oxford in general, just super excited about this fall, and we'll be kicking it off here in about 3 weeks.
Keith, how are you going to handle these crowds? How are you going to be able to this influx of people with this high lofty preseason ranking, as well as all on-campus parking passes are sold out?
Well, I think, we'll look at it as we look at every season. And while we haven't had a season sellout, to start the season in a few years, I think since 2016, obviously we've had huge games. We've had games where, sold out stadiums and tons of people, coming to campus and coming to the Grove and those type of things. So we'll have a great plan for that. I know Mayor Tannehill and Oxford and, the various, police departments and with UPD and OPD, sheriff's department, state troopers, we'll have a great plan for traffic flow and all those things, but just a lot of fun. This is, again, what we want here in Oxford. And, we know that there's some challenges with this many people coming to Oxford, but they're good challenges to try to figure out.
How's the concert coming the night before?
It's going great. I think we're up to about 3,000 tickets sold, maybe a few more than that. And obviously, as students continue to get back into town, we feel like those numbers will continue to grow. It's a great idea, to have a concert the night before the first game. Brett Young, the headliner, obviously played baseball here at Ole Miss, a good friend of ours. Josh Kelly, Mustache the Band. So it should be a great show. And I think that's what we're looking to do. We know the football game and the Grove and everything that surrounds those festivities, but we want to make sure that everybody coming to Oxford has an opportunity to get as much as they can and have as much fun as they can. So I think the concert's going to be a lot of fun, a little bit of a test case, obviously the first one we've done like this, but hopefully we can do a lot more in the future.
Keith, you guys made the announcement a couple of years ago with the advent of the NIL. A lot of things happening in regards to stadium expansion. I know there are some plans tentatively for the west side of Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. You look at what you guys are rolling out with Ole Miss Athletics, with the you guys are calling it the Ole Miss Memories, a lot of opportunities for fans to utilize some of the facilities there on campus. What are some things going on this year in regards to enhancements to the stadium, maybe some game day atmospheres, some things that fans can be looking forward to?
Well, yeah, you mentioned the bigger kind of broader projects, and the West Side was a huge project, and we put that on hold for now. We hope to come back to that at some point. We're looking at some other options, more from a capital standpoint for the stadium, maybe down the road a little bit. But obviously with NIL and everything that's changed, we want to get a good handle on what that looks like here over the next year or two, with rev share starting next year and those type of things. But we always want to be improving and enhancing our stadium and all of our venues. So, we got some things that will be a little different this year. I mentioned the student section. That's going to be exclusively for Ole Miss students this year. We'll have some announcements about that, coming out here in the next couple of weeks on how that'll all work. But in order to fit as many Ole Miss students in there as possible, we're going to make that an exclusive area for them only. We got some really cool things game by game, when you talk about flyovers and, fireworks shows and different things and being creative there. And obviously we know the product on the field is going to be really good this year. So we're anticipating just a fantastic home season. Again, we want it to be a great experience from the time people cross the county line into Lafayette County, coming to the games, to the time they leave on Sunday afternoon, and everything in between. So we're going to do our best to do that, and it should be a lot of fun.
Keith, talk a little bit, if you will, about the Lane Kiffin effect, the culture he's building. What is it about Lane Kiffin and his program that's making it so successful?
Well, I think we knew, back in 2019 when we hired Coach Kiffin, that he had kind of some star power. He'd been a lot of places. He'd done some really cool things, won some national championships as an assistant coach, and, had that national cachet. And I think we wanted to capitalize on that. We felt like we won the press conference, when we introduced him. But obviously, you got to follow that up with some substance and win games. And it's been really, really awesome to work alongside Coach Kiffin the past 4.5 years to build this program to where it is, and give him all the credit, give the staff and the student athletes all the credit. But this is where we wanted to be. This is what we talked about really day one in our very first meeting, was taking Ole Miss football to kind of where we are right now, relevancy across the national landscape, the opportunity to compete and win at the highest level, and compete for SEC and national championships. And I don't think it can be understated how much of an impact Lane himself has had in that. Obviously with his relationship with national media and his relationships nationally in general. So it's been fun. It's been fun to see his professional growth, his personal growth, all those things over the past 4 years. And it's going to be really cool to see a lot of that come to fruition, here in a few weeks. And again, a lot of work to do. We got to get out on the field and prove it, but we've set ourselves up, and he has set us up in a really cool place.
We've had a chance to visit with head coach Lane Kiffin a couple of times prior to the season. And many times, Keith, he talks about how talented this roster is on paper, but they have to perform on the field. We've seen all the preseason magazines, talk shows, Ole Miss in the top 5, top 10 across the country. There's a good opportunity, should things fall correctly, that Ole Miss has a chance to do some things they haven't done before, possibly SEC championship game, and then possibly hosting a home playoff game. How do you prepare for that from an administrative standpoint, logistically, for having a chance to make history at Ole Miss?
Well, what a great question, and one that, we've been preparing and hoping to answer for a long time. How do you prepare for a season that could, be one of the most historical seasons that we've ever had at Ole Miss? And again, a lot of credit to Lane and the staff and the team. To your point, we got to go out and execute. We got to go out and make it happen now that the season's here, the roster has been assembled. We've got to take that to the field. You got to stay healthy, all the things you have to do in football, right? But at the same time, we're going to prepare as if we're going to go win a national championship, and we're going to prepare as if we're going to, host a playoff game or whatever that could look like. So, again, as you mentioned, a lot of opportunities for first. You've never been to the SEC championship game. We are going into this season with our eyes wide open that, all of those things are strong possibilities. And so, again, got to put the work in. Tons of things that have to happen between now and then. But as administration, we'll make sure that we're prepared for all those scenarios.
A follow-up question on that. What is the tiebreaker in the SEC? With a 16-team league, I see a train wreck coming. I see a team that could be 8-0, 4 or 5 that could be 7-1. How is that going to be broken? Who gets to play in the championship game? And how do we rank as many as 6 teams that would have an argument to get into the playoffs?
Absolutely. I think you're going to see that. I think you're going to see, a lot of parity in our league, a lot of teams that are in that 10, 11, 12 win region. And, the tiebreaker in the league obviously starts with head-to-head. Then there's a kind of a litany of ways you go down the list on how, the tiebreaker can be solved. But this is the first year with no, it's now we have no division. So it's going to be the top 2 teams that'll go to the SEC championship game, which is great. I think that gives a lot of opportunity for all the league. And then, as you mentioned, 4, 5, 6 teams that could be in contention for the 12-team playoff. So that's really, really exciting. I think the SEC, obviously adding Texas and Oklahoma, a very deep league, and we'll have an opportunity to state our case throughout the season for how many we can put into the college football playoff. But I think it's going to be, year in and year out. It doesn't really matter if you have 4 teams or 12 teams or 14 teams that, we're anticipating to go to at some point. There's always going to be that controversy when you get down to the last 2 or 3 teams and what that looks like. I think the SEC is going to have a strong case every single year, again, to put 4, 5, 6 teams in the playoffs. So hopefully that's the case.
And Keith, you mentioned revenue sharing starting next year and all the NIL stuff. Talk about some of the other sports and maybe that impact, as well as facility updates in terms of, or even team updates in terms of the basketball team specifically, but also the Olympic sports. The Olympics are going on right now, and we've got some athletes over there competing.
Absolutely. We have spent a ton of time really all year, especially this summer, working on different scenarios with what rev share could look like. Now with roster limits and unlimited scholarships for every program, what that could potentially look like. You got Title IX, concerns and parts of that conversation, obviously financial status there as well. So working through all that, I think for us, we want to make sure that we continue to resource our program so that we can compete and win. We were in the SEC. We're going to have the opportunity to do that. But at the same time, we got to be smart. We've got to come up with $22 million starting next year to start, with our rev share to the student athletes. So how do we find new revenues? How do we tighten our belt a little bit on expenses? And again, still give that first class experience to our student athletes and coaches. So it's a giant, math problem to solve. But in a lot of ways, while it's challenging, there's a lot of opportunities as well. So we'll continue to work through that, working closely with the SEC league office on where the House settlement stands and the progress it's making. But yeah, from a facility standpoint, at least the way we look at it, certainly we want to continue to maintain facilities, enhance facilities when we can. I don't really see us, rolling out a big capital project or campaign anytime soon. We'll finish the softball stadium. Obviously, we got some things we're going to do with our soccer stadium and our Gillum Center. We put our baseball project on hold for a little while. But I think everybody, I was just on an AD call this morning. Everybody's trying to figure out what this next 12 to 24 months could look like with the rev share. So it's not just us. I mean, there's a lot of universities and certainly athletics departments that are trying to figure it out.
Keith, we talked at the beginning of the show how good of a player you were for Ole Miss on the hardwood. Frank talked a moment ago about the pavilion, beautiful facility there on campus. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Chris Beard and what he's brought to the table, new assistants, a lot of new players. But the good news for Ole Miss basketball, it's held on to its current roster. The way too early top 25 has Ole Miss ranked number 20. I know you're excited because I've talked to a lot of fans. They're excited about the upcoming season as well. And also Coach Joe and the women's team, she's breaking a number of glass ceilings in the women's basketball program as well.
Yeah, I really couldn't be more excited than where I am with both of our basketball programs. Obviously, Coach Yo, has done a fantastic job of building that program, and we're an NCAA tournament team every year. We know that's going to happen. She's gotten us to that status, and obviously Sweet 16, a couple years ago, and like you said, we have an opportunity there to really take some next steps, get to a Final Four. And as Coach Yo said from day one, she thinks we can win a national championship here, and I believe that as well. Coach Beard going into year two, so much opportunity there. Like you said, we were able to hold on to some of our guys from last year that came back. Obviously, a really nice portal class. Some accolades preseason, as you're mentioning. And Coach Beard's always traditionally been really good in year two. He's been able to kind of, check out the program, kind of, see where things are and really build a great roster in year two. So we're hoping, the same happens this year. But great building, as you mentioned, the pavilion, a lot of national hype with both of those programs. And you're really looking forward, especially, as you mentioned, a former basketball guy, excited to see where both of those programs can go this year.
Keith, it's something you mentioned reminded me to ask you, how are they going to do the scheduling specifically for the other sports and maybe even football as we go forward with the SEC having expanded? Have you gotten a final feel for how that's going to work every year?
Well, not specifically yet. There's so much discussion. Right now we have 8 SEC football games, a lot of discussion on will we go to 9 SEC football games. I have a feeling that we will at some point, just my gut. I think we'll go to 9. You look across really all the scheduling, as you mentioned, there's been working groups within the SEC ADs and administrators to figure out what those schedules could look like. Do we add more more games since we're adding 2 additional teams? I think in some sports you'll have additional games and some you won't, just depending on your different specific factors in each of those sports. But I'm really excited about the fact that we're going to have an opportunity, one, to add these 2 great brands to our league, but also just get to where we're playing more teams. We're traveling in the old football schedule. We were playing the East every 6 years, so you could be an incoming freshman at Ole Miss in football and never play Georgia or Tennessee or Florida. That's not good for the student athlete. It's not good for the fans. And so I'm excited about kind of the methodology that we've talked about playing these teams more often, home and away, whether it's in football or any other sport. I think that'll be great for our league.
Hey, Keith, once again, thank you very much for joining us here today. One final question. The fans have a question for you. It has to do with Ole Miss baseball. We've talked a lot about facilities, but after Ole Miss won that 2022 national championship, I know there's going to be a lot of stuff going on outside of Swayze Field. What's the future in regards to any type of statues or any type of remembrance of that 2022 season? I know that's something that definitely will live on in history.
No doubt. And if you were in Swayze, this spring, you saw the Elko statue. You saw some of the temporary, things we did for the national championship team. All of that will be was supposed to be a part of this third base project that we kind of put on hold for now. We have all those plans. We're going to come back to that, and we obviously know that we need to commemorate that in a huge way. The 22 national championship, everything that team did, Coach B did. And we'll get that right. We're just going to have to put it on hold for a little bit longer. have the temporary, signage and statue, all that stuff that will be inside of Swayze for maybe the next year or two. But we love that team. We'll never forget that team and everything that they did and meant to Ole Miss and Oxford. And we will certainly make sure that we remember them the right way at the appropriate time.
Once again, it's been our pleasure to welcome in the athletic director from Ole Miss, Keith Carter, on our episode number 1 of Magnolia Fields. And we thank you so much, sir. We hope to have you back on soon.
Thanks, Keith.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more of episode 1 right after this.
Welcome back to the Magnolia Fields studios, brought to you by Richard Schwartz and Associates. One call, that's all.
Welcome back into Magnolia Fields episode 1. We sure did appreciate Keith Carter joining us there for our first shot at this. Big impact guy. He's got a job, a bigger job than I ever wanted to have. It's a job.
And, Ole Miss fans think of him so favorably, but different generations, Frank, as you will understand, is he was a player from 95 to 99 and was a terrific basketball player and actually came back as the director of the Ole Miss Athletic Foundation and kind of worked himself up. He was assistant athletic director to Ross Bjork. Bjork, of course, left for Texas A&M, and then he was the logical fit to be the athletic director. And to see what he's been able to do, not only from a financial situation, but just from a coaching situation, about how well this staff has been put together across the athletic dynamic for Ole Miss. And we talked before the break, with Lane Kiffin as the head football coach, I think basketball is in great hands with Chris Beard, a terrific hire. We've seen the acquisitions from the portal offseason with so many players coming in. He was able to hold his roster from last year. Very few, if any, enter the portal. And you've got the women's program doing well. Of course, the 22 national championship. We talked a little bit about that from a facility standpoint at Swayze Field. We'll see what happens. They went to the portal a lot for baseball after a couple of bad seasons under Ole Miss standards. But all in all, a really good athletic department so far. Yeah,
it's really – I can't explain the excitement for this season of football coming up.
Yeah.
And I know he's got so many issues there, and he just works his way through it. In terms of people coming in town, getting in the game, getting in the Grove, that is a huge task.
Logistically, it is. And ironically, I talked with Jordan Watkins this past Wednesday. Of course, everybody knows Jordan Watkins, the talented wide receiver, one of the many wide receivers coming back on this Ole Miss team. And not only are they shying away from these expectations, they're embracing them. And he actually told me that they openly talk about winning a national championship. He talked about having conversations with Caden Prescorn, the tight end, the quarterback, Jackson Dart, the wide receiver, Trey Harris. They came back as a collective group to win a national championship. They're actually going towards it head on. Lane Kiffin even talked about embracing the expectations, understanding it's right. It's on paper. You've got to do it on the field, but they understand the talent that they have coming back. And that's one thing I applaud Keith for doing. He understands those expectations are there. He understands the fans demand excellence. And so far, they've created a pretty big giant. Now they've got to feed that giant. Yeah. But looking at the schedule, we'll get into all of that. It's a great opportunity.
That's episode 2. Yeah.
It's a great opportunity. We encourage you guys to hang on. It's a great opportunity to win a lot of games for Ole Miss this year, and we'll get into that. But I was really appreciative that Keith was as candid as he was about how Ole Miss fans are really excited about this season, and anything less than 10-2, Frank, I think is going to be a disappointment.
I think the concert's a great idea. I think
that was a good question by you. I'm glad you asked that.
I think that's just something else to get people into the town of Oxford and excited and hyped and pumped about the 2024 football season. Next week when the AP poll comes out, top 7, top 6.
Yeah, I think.
First time since the Nixon administration in 1970 in the AP poll. We've already seen the coaches poll, but the AP poll comes out next week. And those are lofty expectations.
And here's one thing that I encourage Ole Miss fans to do. Keith talked about how, those awards are great and those preseason accolades are great. But here's the positive thing about that. It's when you start that high and you stay there and you keep winning, it's a lot better chance of getting that college football playoff than if you start low and work yourself up. Ask Auburn from 99 with Tommy Tuberville, whenever they went undefeated. And
Florida
they didn't,
State last year.
They didn't win the national championship because of that. So maybe not been that year, but it was a year in which Auburn went undefeated. So the good news is you start that high, you don't have to go as far. You keep winning. Some really good things. I want to go back to the concert a moment. For folks that don't know, Brett Young was a former pitcher at Ole Miss. He's got a couple of songs that actually talk about Ole Miss. And David Kellum, the voice of the Rebels, has a couple of, they use some of the excerpts from David Kellum's calls from when Brett Young was pitching at Ole Miss. So that's going to be a cool concert. As Keith told us, 3,000 tickets have been sold. I expect it to be a nice crowd. Great idea. I think the pavilion's a perfect place for a concert. So a lot of positive things going on. And I didn't ask Keith during the interview, but I wanted to ask him, what's Jackson Avenue going to be like on Georgia weekend? It's going to be a parking lot.
It is. It's absolutely going to be. It's going to be nuts.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun, but it's going to be absolute nuts. We've had a lot of fun on here on episode 1. Don't forget you can find us just wherever you get your podcast. Even an old guy like me can find podcasts these days. You don't have to have anything to download. You just go find your podcast. If I can find it, you guys can find it. We appreciate Richard Schwartz and Associates for being our studio sponsor, and we thank you guys so much. We're not wrapping up. We've got a few more minutes left in this first episode. And Brad, final thoughts on Keith or Ole Miss or the football season? Bottom line it for me. What are you looking for most? Forward to most?
Lane Kiffin. I mean, you asked the question of Keith, the Lane Kiffin effect. I mean, we've seen Ole Miss is going to have the largest freshman class in the history of college and universities in the state of Mississippi. The same thing happened to Alabama when it was winning all of those national championships under head coach Nick Saban. I think we're seeing the Lane Kiffin effect branch outside of athletics, and so I'll be excited to see how he handles this success. I think Lane Kiffin, honestly, Frank, is a little different after the passing of his dad. His dad, Monty Kiffin, was a standout defensive coordinator, created the Tampa 2, has his name in the Tampa Ring of Honor, and was one of the eminent defensive coordinators in the NFL. But he was close to his dad, and his dad was very close to the program. And when he passed, Lane seemed different. And he seemed a little more, I guess you could say, subdued, not quite as enthusiastic. And I think a lot of that is, reflection and understanding he has an incredible football team. I asked him, Frank, this past Wednesday at Media Day, following the Georgia game, he said basically after the game, we didn't have the players, we didn't have the coaching. We did not have a team that could compete with our college football playoff. 52-17 was the loss. I've been waiting a while to ask him this question. Wednesday, I asked him, Coach, did you answer the questions during the offseason to give you those coaching staff and the players? And he very simply said yes. He knows the team.
You say it's reflection. I think there's a little bit extra added focus there.
Could be. That's a good point, and it could
probably
be added
based on having reflected.
No doubt.
And now I know I've got to focus. That's going to be our final thought. It's been a pleasure to be here in the Max South Sports Network. We always enjoy working with the men and women here behind the cameras, doing all the great music for us. There it is, right there in my ear. Thank you so much. We hope you've enjoyed episode 1. Episode 2 will be coming up in a couple weeks. We'll see you then.